Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Beyond the Shears, where groomers get business savvy. Today's episode is all about something that many business entrepreneurs struggle with, and that is ADHD. Believe it or not. From forgotten appointments and scattered thoughts to bursts of creativity and hyper focus, ADHD can be both a challenge and a strength to entrepreneurs. Joining me today is Suzi Payton, a UK-based coach, comedian, and speaker who helps adults with ADHD not just cope, but to thrive. We'll be talking about late diagnosis, common signs, and how to build a business around your brain, not against it. Whether you've been diagnosed or suspect that you may have ADHD or just trying to better understand your own mental energy, this conversation will be validating, insightful, and probably pretty fun too. But before we dive into all of that, Suzi, can you tell us a little bit more about yourself and how did you get into both coaching and comedy? I want to learn more about that.
Okay, yeah, thanks for having me, Crystal. I'm really excited to be here. So, yep, I'm Suzi Payton. I live in Brighton in England, which is on the south coast, and I am a coach, a comedian, a speaker, a podcaster, an events host. I thrive with all of the novelty, and I need to be doing different things because I have an ADHD brain, which is I'm also autistic. So quite often ADHD and autism are at loggerheads with each other, and they kind of contradict each other as well. So my background is education. I was a teacher for 17 years, and for the past 5 years I've been building my own business, which I absolutely love, and now I'm making my life work for me by working with lots of wonderful people and helping to make the world a better place for neurodivergent folk.
That's nice. And sometimes I hear the term neurospicy sometimes, and that kind of makes me laugh a little bit. I'm like, yeah, but I feel that way. I feel like a little bit of neurospicy at times for sure. So, Suzi, thank you so much. So you went from teaching to running your own business in order to have a platform in order to help people specifically with ADHD, and it sounds like autism as well. So it's curious to me, and we might get a little bit more into this a little bit deeper later on in the podcast. But for you, you said that the autism and ADHD oftentimes kind of contradict each other. What are some of the ways that that shows up for you?
So being ADHD, I love to do different things. I love change. I love spontaneity. And being autistic, I really struggle with change and
Mm,
spontaneity.
okay.
So
Okay.
it's getting those two working together. My autistic part of my brain really needs order, but my ADHD part of my brain finds that hard to achieve. So, my office space is quite messy, um, and that upsets me quite a bit. And I am making improvements in working with my brain to get it a bit more in order. So yeah, and I think those the two differences cover each other up as well.
I
So
got you. I got you.
yeah.
Yeah, I know oftentimes I am very new, everyone. I'm very new on this journey with ADHD, autism, and any kind of neurodivergent processes. But the little bit of research I have done, I did notice that oftentimes people who have autism or oftentimes have some type of ADHD as well in many cases, especially adults mostly. So one of the things I did hear is that, especially during conversations, it's harder to diagnose when you have both autism and ADHD because it doesn't present as a standard way because the ADHD side is very like spontaneity, and they like to talk, they like to interact, and they're hyperactive, they like to get involved. But the autistic side of it is very reserved. They don't want to be out in public and that way. So oftentimes it is misdiagnosed because you have one lifting up the other, so it kind of balances out. And so that's why it can be a little hard to diagnose. Is that for your case? Do you find that true?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, my first autism assessment, they completely missed everything, even though I'd spent 5 years putting a folder together of evidence. I mean, I don't know any neurotypical person that would spend 5 years putting a folder of evidence together about themselves. This was 13 years ago, and things have thankfully moved on a bit since then. But I am what you call high masking. It's how I kind of learnt to cope in the world. So I do appear very able, and I am very able in lots of ways, but my challenges were not always understood or acknowledged, because people would see the able part of me, which in some ways is good, but in other ways it gets your needs missed growing up, and
Yeah. So you basically knew something. It sounded like from earlier on, you probably knew something was like slightly different from the way that your brain handles and processes information. And again, wanting to really stress here to the audience that, this is very common. And the reason we're having this conversation today is to make sure that you understand that you are not alone if you are experiencing this. And in fact, Susie and I were just talking about an email recently that I too have been recently stated that I want to start getting the testing. I'm going through the testing process of this because I found little triggers in me that I have. Kind of joking aside, because I did post something like this in my chat with my Facebook group. How many notebooks do you typically have laying around that are half empty? And I counted mine's currently 12. So, so it's like I have to get a new notebook for every project. And I too, Susie, I believing when I say my office too is messy. So I'm right there with you on that one. And the thing is, I am a public accountant, so it's a little harder for me to function in an environment like that. But I look around, and it is the overwhelm that gets to me, right? It's the overwhelm. It's like, where do I even start? Like I can't sit down long enough in my brain to say, okay, it probably wouldn't take me, 15, 20 minutes to quote, pick up in my office, but I can't do it oftentimes. So it's a little difficult for that. But I do want to get to know a little bit more about what triggered you, to Susie, to want to get tested and start your ADHD journey. Like, what was some of the things that made you want to say, okay, I need to start getting tested with this and see if this is what's really going on?
Yeah, so throughout my childhood, I massively underachieved in school. I was very, very gifted in some areas, such as sports and English lessons, and really challenged in things like maths and science. And basically, I just couldn't concentrate. So I messed around and had a lot of fun, winding up the teachers and just having fun, really, because I couldn't. And what's pretty sad about that is I am quite proud in a way, because I have a cheeky sense of humour. But underneath all that was low self-esteem, low confidence, shame that I couldn't, get the homework in, shame that I couldn't concentrate in class, so I covered it all up by being the class clown. So I knew that was evident in my childhood, and I worked as a teacher, so I did quite a few trainings around autism and ADHD, so things started to make sense. And back then I was £20,000 in debt. I felt like I couldn't control my spending. I was very impulsive. I'm a very different person now to what I was back then, because I've done a lot of inner work, which is
Good.
great.
Yeah.
Yeah, lots of different jobs. I would get bored, or I would be misunderstood, so I would leave. And I've had lots of jobs which I loved. I was an activity instructor. I worked on a summer camp in America, which was amazing. And I was an admin assistant, which didn't go down too well. The the running commentary was, Susie, you put the invoices in the wrong order again. I just couldn't get my brain to work that out. And I was struggling in work and with noise, noisy office environments. I couldn't hear if the photocopier was doing its thing or the printer. And it was very frustrating, smells, lots of sensory issues. So eventually I thought, if I'm going to be able to work in an environment, I need to get assessed. So that's what took me on that journey.
Yeah. And that's probably also, and I completely understand where you're coming from with the environment, especially the kind of chaotic, all the noises, the distractions. I call it squirreling, is what I call it. I squirrel really bad. Like, oh, look, a squirrel. And I do it even working for myself. But yes, I worked in several offices, so I understand exactly where you're coming from. And so, Susie, a lot of our audience today, obviously, we have small business owners that are out there, but a lot of them actually are specifically pet grooming business owners. So they are in a very high, distractible environment. And so, how they do this, I really don't know, but they do a really good job. And so, but I do know a lot of these small business owners that I work with are also neurodivergent. And so, this is actually why one of the main reasons I wanted to have you on is to try to get a little bit of understanding about this. But with the high stressed environment, like I kept finding myself like I would be distracted and I would look and I would have a conversation with someone over here. Like they would come up to my desk and they would say, I need something. And I'm right in the middle of a task. And then I would forget what I was doing or where I was. And it took me a good 5 to 10 minutes just to get back on
Yeah.
track. So it was a lot of times, what I call time suck. It's just a time waste.
Yeah.
And so it was really hard for me. I'm like, I can't click it on and off. I have to refocus. And it takes my brain a second to get back on that wheel of focus.
Yeah.
And so that's what's really hard for me. So when I chose to go and work for myself, that was one of the best things I ever decided to do because it's very quiet here. I work from home in an office and I get a lot more done that way. Now, obviously, it doesn't help whenever I'm playing, games because I have to train my brain to refocus. So sometimes I actually take what I call a video game break because it actually helps my brain flip a little bit to get back into be able to focus because I can only work on a project for so long. And then it's like I go cross-eyed. I'm like, I can't focus on this anymore. Like my brain is just numb right now and I need to like recenter it. So yeah, that's something that shows up for me that way. So I found it really interesting about how common ADHD, how common it is to be undiagnosed or even diagnosed later in life. Are you finding that in your studies and research about being diagnosed later?
Yeah. Yeah. All of my coaching clients are late in life, either identified and or
Mm,
diagnosed. Yeah, there's a whole generation of people, men and women and other genders as well, who have, you know, s- slipped under the radar. And I think a lot of that is to do with the stereotypes that it's just for little boys that are hyperactive. And of course, that's not true. Not everybody with ADHD is hyperactive. So so many people are finally, after many years, getting the answers and realizing that they're not they're different, and not defective. So there's a lot of grieving that they experience as well, and then healing.
I also noticed, I think, have found that women tend to are the most undiagnosed or underdiagnosed gender because of the way it shows up. Are you noticing that as well? Like women tend to not be diagnosed correctly?
Yeah, there's lots of missed and misdiagnoses, absolutely. So quite often, I don't know if it's your experience, that many people with ADHD can develop high anxiety, because of years of messaging like you're not good enough, you're late, you're lazy, all of that. So of course that's going to result in anxiety. So the doctor, the GP, the practitioners will often say, oh yes, you're anxious, here's some anti-anxiety tablets, or oh, you're depressed, here's some antidepressants, quite often I've heard that bipolar disorder is a lot of the time unmanaged ADHD, not all of the time, and of course the two can coexist. And I think it also because of how traditionally women have been seen, as in, oh, you know, you're being emotional, you're creating a
Or
fuss,
you're
so just
hormonal.
hormonal, yeah, absolutely. And it's dismissed, which is so sad. And I'm so glad there's so much more awareness now, because it means that people can get answers.
Yeah, and I'm so glad you brought up the anxiety part because I know for me, I had chronic anxiety in or especially in my early 20s. I had to be put on Zoloft, which is an anti-anxiety medication, and I quickly took myself off of it because it just kind of like zoned you. It's the only way I can describe it. It just made you just zone out. And I'm like, I can't live my life like this. I'm like, I got to find other ways to cope with this. And so I went more of the natural route. I started taking a lot of natural herbs and supplements that actually helped calm me down. And I do think it helped for a while, but eventually there are other things, not just supplements or medication. I think there are other things such as routines that also help, and setting yourself up for success within your own environment is such a big
Yeah.
deal. And so that's something I'm hoping to work with my therapist about and figure out which one works for me as well. So let's talk about a little bit, Susie, about some of the signs, maybe just a couple of signs that someone might be living with ADHD. Can you give me a couple of examples for me?
So you mentioned overwhelm earlier on, which can be a sign, you know, and if you're so overwhelmed that you don't know where to start, or that you just freeze and you don't do anything, but you're really capable in other areas of your life, that could potentially be a sign. And we, as ADHD people, are when we're feeling good, we tend to think we can do everything all of the time. So we take on all of the projects. We just say yes to this party, that, yes to everything. And then all of a sudden it's too much and can't do anything. And then you're having to either say, I'm sorry, I'm really ill, I can't come to the party, or tell the truth, I've just got too much on. And it's a bit of a roller coaster. And until you know what's going on, it's hard to kind of maintain that balance. But when you do know, then you can build the balance and the structure, like you said. And so that's one sign. Um, have you heard of rejection sensitivity?
Just recently, but if you don't mind, can you explain to everyone what that is?
Yeah, so rejection sensitivity dysphoria, often called RSD, because that's a lot easier to say, is it's not part of the assessment criteria for ADHD, but it's becoming more and more talked about and realized that many people with ADHD experience increased pain when they experience rejection and criticism, and that, whether that's genuine criticism or rejection, or whether they feel it that way. And it's basically a trauma response. So if we've spent our lives feeling rejected and criticized just for being ourselves, all of those comments like, you're so sensitive, you're so over the top, you're too much, you're too dramatic, all of those messages really take their toll and literally change the brain, so that we can feel really sensitive and hurt when we feel rejected. And that can play out in emotional outbursts, or it can be internalized, which it was for me. And I always thought that, what's wrong with me? What have I done this time? So that's something to be really aware of. I think it's so helpful for people to know about that part.
Yeah, I've recently, excuse me, there's a couple that I've recently came across on YouTube, and they're actually in the UK as well. I'm forgive me, I don't know their names or their handle, but they do a lot of what are called shorts on YouTube, and they have the ADHD thing. She has like blue hair and black hair, and
Yeah, Roxy, and I can't remember his name.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. They're so I really enjoy it because number one, it's short bursts, so I can focus on it, right? But a lot of the things, I giggled at her latest one because she was talking specifically about the notebooks. I said, that's me. And so it's nice to be able to like, identify with things. And I'm like, yes, okay. So that is possibly an ADHD thing. I did not even know that. And so yeah, it's really fascinating. But she was the one who also talked about RSD. She brings that up as well. And so I just, like I said, I just recently started learning about that. Now I have been officially diagnosed with PTSD and OCD as well, and so that's why I'm like, it probably makes sense that I have the ADHD in order to help cope with a lot of this stuff, especially the trauma. And a lot of people, and I'm so glad that a lot of people are realizing that this is not um, taboo anymore, right? We can openly talk about this kind of thing now because, we've all experienced, I think, in our lives some level of trauma, some level of, exposure that, essentially will somewhat, like you said, rewire and reprogram the brain because our brains are there in order to help us survive. So it will rewire itself in order to make us survive. And I think the ADHD is also somewhat of a coping mechanism in order to get us from point A to point B safely. And so I think that's why we do that because we have to basically go through life and we are constantly being bombarded with stimulus and things like that, and our brains are trying to sort all of that out. And so I know, and sometimes things might feel like you said overwhelm is the number one, I guess, trigger for me, and I don't know how to say no oftentimes, especially to new clients. So I will take on a lot of new clients at once, and then I don't my time management or to my time space, so to speak, as far as how long it's going to take me to do a project may or may not be accurate. But if I'm in that whole, okay, let me take on as many people as I can because I want to help as many people as I can, then I get lost in that time management and it goes out the window. Normally, I do have pretty good time management, but when I'm in that yes, yes, yes mode, like you were just saying, it's done. Like I'm done. And so I end up not being able to perform at my best ability that I know I can. Yeah, so that's been a little tough for me. So that's something I'm really hoping that with therapy and things we can get that worked out. So yeah, I was going to ask you also, what would be one of the first steps if someone was wanting to be diagnosed by a practitioner? What would be the first step for that?
So I would do some research, and that research can be articles and it can be short videos, because that's what our brains need. So any way to kind of do some research, and if you really identify with it and it's making sense, which it does for so many of us, then I would write down some notes, um, and I would look at the assessment criteria while you do that, which is not the most enlightening thing to look at because it's all very deficit based. But, look at that, make the notes, join the dots. And I don't know what the process is in America, but over here it would be take it to your doctor and ask to be referred. So what I say to people, because quite often their doctor says something like, oh no, it's anxiety. You haven't got ADHD, you've got a job. Some of them, not all of them, but say things like that, which is very unhelpful. So what I say to them is, you're not asking for your doctor's opinion, you're asking for them to make the referral. So that's, some doctors are great and they'll do it straight away, but some won't. And I think make the notes, speak to your friends and family if you have a good relationship, ask them to be honest and to give you feedback in that respect, bearing in mind rejection sensitivity could be at play, so ask for it kindly and only ask for it if you're prepared to hear it.
Sure. Yeah, yeah, that's a big deal. It's where you are emotionally at that time. Yeah, make sure you can take that. Yeah, and so Well, thank you so much for that. And so, you, Susie, like you said, you're a business owner. You have your own business now. So, this one I think you can definitely speak to for sure. So, obviously, a lot of my audience, we own our own businesses out here. And so, I know sometimes ADHD can show up in interesting ways when it comes to entrepreneurs. Because let's face it, entrepreneurs, we have to wear many hats anyway. That's just what we do. So we are kind of like all over the place as far as what needs to be done, delegation if we have employees and staff. And so we're kind of like all over the place. So in your experience, what are some of the unique ways ADHD has shown up for business owners specifically?
So for me, it's the ability to be creative and create my own business, and that's unlike any other that I've seen, to be honest. So as a speaker and a comedian, I combine those two in a rather bold way. And I speak at conferences, and I speak about the difficult stuff like we're talking about today. And then I weave in the kind of comedic storytelling, making people laugh, so, and they're laughing, but they're also going, oh my gosh, that's me as well, you know.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and I think that's down to me being kind of neurodivergent, taking those bold risks and not thinking I just have to be a professional speaker and I have to be all serious. Absolutely not, because then I wouldn't be aligned to my values, which are fun, freedom, and adventure. So I've got the freedom to do whatever I like, and that's worth its weight in gold, So, I'm working on days where I have high energy, make good use of that, batch creating content, for example, or planning courses that then I need help to implement, but I get there, I have a coach. And then days when I don't have the energy to be kind to myself and say, look, it's okay, you can rest. And I build in a lot of rest anyway. But giving myself permission to do it my way in a way that works for me. And that's what I would really recommend other people do.
Yeah, I noticed that rest is really key. And I think oftentimes, especially as business owners, we don't take enough rest for ourselves. I know for a fact there's a lot of my clients out there that own their own businesses that they work almost 7 days a week. And I'm like, listen, you shouldn't have to work 7 days a week. We all need rest, especially our minds. I mean, our bodies need rest too, but our brains need to be able to shut down just for a minute and not have to do anything. Like, for example, I felt guilty a little bit. Again, the guilt, right? The guilt and shame kind of comes with it. But on Saturday, I took a rest and I said, I'm going to kind of lay in bed most of the day today. I'm really tired. I'm going through some things physically because of low iron and anemia right now, which is making me also tired physically. We know we're handling it, so we're okay now. But it's just I'm having to be very gentle with myself because I think a lot of that you said we internalize, especially women. I think we mostly internalize things, and so and not shaming myself. And when I was in coaching, getting my coaching certification, one of the very first things that my mentor, my instructor told us, she would say, don't should on yourself. And she said, and don't should on anybody else because like you should be doing this or you should be doing that. No, that's not, we'll take should out of the vocabulary. So I appreciated that a lot. And so it kind of put things more in perspective for me. And as far as also how often I was doing it, it really surprised myself, you know. So a lot of the things that I personally have found harder to deal with sometimes is setting up schedules and sticking to them because like you said, sometimes we feel like we can do something, sometimes we don't, whether they're high energy or low energy. And that's oftentimes hard, especially when you have business, you have appointments, you have schedules. So and communication sometimes with clients it can also be harder, especially if you're having that difficult conversation. If you have to have what you know is going to be a not fun conversation with someone, how would you suggest possibly approaching that for someone with ADHD? Like, how can we approach those difficult conversations?
I think a good idea would be to kind of work out in advance what it is you want to say and and maybe even use Chat GPT or Copilot or any AI that you use. If you put into Chat GPT, look, I need to have this conversation. It's about this, this, and this. I want to say it in a calm yet assertive way. And then Chat GPT or any AI will give you a script. And you don't have to read off of the script to have the conversation, because that might sound a bit weird. But to be prepared, is key. And do it when you've got most energy during the day. And if you haven't got any energy that day, perhaps do it another day when you have. And I think it's all about boundaries, isn't it, with yourself and with other people. And
Yeah. Yeah, I know. I mean, and let's face it, none of us like to have, difficult conversations. That's not even an ADHD thing. That's just normal human nature, so we have to learn how, like you said, how to cope with that a little bit differently. But that's a really good point, though, doing it in a day where you have a little bit more energy so you can absorb and take in a little bit more easily. Because if you're completely worn out and tired, you're not going to come across as the professional business owner sometimes. And so you want to be able to be strong and steady and have that foundation that you need to have that conversation. It's about the presentation of it as well. So yeah, so I know a lot of times with ADHD, we tend to talk about, things that we may not be able to do 100%. But let's talk about the flip side about ADHD, because ADHD sometimes can be a superpower. It really can, because the way that we can focus and intensely focus on things. So in your study and in your journey, are there anything as far as from a business perspective, like business tasks that ADHD people might excel at?
um, it does depend on the individual. But I think some of the kind of strengths that I personally have are creativity, doing things differently, not being afraid, or being afraid, but kind of being really secure in your intentions and who you are. That's why all this inner work is so important, because, and confidence building, I love new experiences. I go to different networking events. I go to, I've all sorts of things. So it's really a case of working out what your individual strengths are and focusing on them, because then it makes the challenges easier to deal with if you're focusing on your strengths.
Yeah. And that's also a pretty good way, I think, the creativity side. I have noticed that a lot of people with ADHD are truly very creative. I think and it needs to come out more often. I think sometimes that's another source of the anxiety is when you're not pulling out that creativity on a regular basis and you're kind of stifling it a little bit. And for me, it's because maybe people and it's my belief system, right? It's not what people have actually said. Again, it's that internalizing what we think people are meaning is that, well, because, for example, I'm an accounting firm owner, therefore I should act and present myself in a specific way. Why? Well, because I saw this person, Mr. Accounting firm owner over here doing that. So he presents in a certain way. So therefore, so should I. And so, but that's not being true to who I am at that point. And so, therefore, that's when the anxiety starts building up. I'm like, okay, this doesn't feel right. I don't like the suit is too stuffy for me. So I need to change a little bit. Because honestly, my hair, it's just the basic brown now, but typically I'm like a bright pink, which, you don't see a lot of accounting firm owners with hot pink hair, right? But it's fun. I'm actually a graphic designer in a former life. And so I love the design work. And I tell people I have to continue to do design work because in accounting, if you're creative, that typically means you go to jail. So you can't
Yeah.
be creative in accounting. So I have to have an outlet somehow to be able to get that out. A lot of my clients are obviously they're dog grooming people, and so they have a tendency to be creatives naturally anyway. They're artists, and they enjoy what they do. So I think that that really helps them to be able to express themselves on a regular basis. So, where I see a lot of my clients struggle, though, is the business side of things, actually running the business. Like they can do dog grooming all day with their eyes closed almost because they're so good at what they do. But they start having that disconnect whenever they start having to do the running of the business, which is why I recommend either working with me or someone like me that can help them actually take on those daily tasks. Do you notice that people with ADHD do better when they start outsourcing a little bit of the things that they don't like doing?
Absolutely. Yeah, 100%. And that's something I would, I wish I had done much earlier, because thinking, oh, I can do everything, it's like just because you can do everything doesn't mean you should. And, our energy is best served with you, in your audience's case, with those lovely doggies. And that's just going back to strengths, empathy. Generally, us ADHD folks have a bundle of empathy, and that's really evident with dog grooming, because that tells you something about a person, that they're a good person if they like
Yeah,
dogs. So
yeah,
you
for
know
sure.
the business side of things, I've got a bookkeeper now who keeps on top of all of that. I send them my receipts. They work out all the books for me, because that's really not my strength, and nor is it something I like to do. um you know Getting that support. And that can be, there's plenty of groups that offer group support if cost is an issue. There's all types of support out there. The challenge can be sometimes finding the one that works for you. But yeah, definitely outsource. Automations as well, so that you don't have to remember to pay this or to do that.
Definitely getting support definitely helps. And that really is one of the things that I've had to personally deal with. I don't know if it's from the ADHD side of it or just my personality. I'm somewhat of a type, what they call a type A personality, where I like to be in control of so many different areas, especially as a business owner. And I'm like, well, I should be able to do this and I should be able to do that. But the thing is, you only have a finite amount of time in every given day, and you need to spend some of that time also, helping yourself and working on yourself at that point as well, and giving yourself rest. And so I think the more I'm learning how to delegate, because that's been a whole different issue to me. Because going from type A, doing everything myself and controlling everything, to now having to delegate, that's been such a change for me. And I don't know, if you have any advice or tips on people like going from being a do it all yourselfer type person to delegation. Are there any steps or suggestions or advice that you can give with that?
I mean, I would recommend working with a coach, to be honest, because the control aspect is a coping mechanism. So if you're, and not you specifically, but if you're wanting to control everything, then there's a lack of trust there, and that can be within other people, but it can also be within yourself. So I think the inner work, so coaching or therapy, to actually feel okay with delegating that work. Because if you don't feel okay about it, it's always going to be, um it's going to get in the way, isn't it? Somehow, some way. And what I yeah, that's right. I just had a thought. Sometimes I work with clients on, they get support and they don't know exactly how to use that support, like a virtual assistant or something. So I spend a whole session with them saying, right, what do you really need help with within your business? And then we kind of list it all out. And then by the end of that session, they can go to their virtual assistant and say, look, I struggle with communication sometimes. So please, will you ask me once a week how I'm getting on with this, and this? So people don't always know what support they need. So it's a really good idea to work all of that out with somebody else.
That's a really good point. Yeah, because if you're not communicating, and that's something that I've noticed within myself, I have a back office of bookkeepers and accountants that are wonderful. They help me out. They help, keep my clients current and their financials current because I have several. So I needed help. It was too much for one person to do by themselves. And also I'm wanting to take this business a little bit different direction where I'm wanting to start online communities as well with that. So I want to focus again, that's the creative side, right? I want to focus on building the website, building the page to help people and I guess putting more time, investing more time in that. And so I can't do that if I'm doing the bookkeeping, if I'm doing the tax preparation and compliance. I can't do two things at once. So that's why I decided to outsource this last year. But I've noticed, like I said, I'm struggling a lot with the delegation and communication, which what you just said, as far as like, what am I expecting? And so it's slowly coming around. I'm trying to be a little bit more proactive, I guess, so to speak. It's like, okay, this is kind of what I need for this week. I need this client to be done and this client to this point. So that way they know exactly what their deadlines are too. So that definitely helps. The communication does help. So I was going to ask you just a couple of like few last minute questions. Just something that you would like people to know more about. So just for fun, I know what is one ADHD myth that you wish would disappear? Like if you could just have wave a magic wand, you're like, I wish that would just go away.
Yeah, I think it's around because there is so much more awareness now. Some people tend to say, oh, everyone's a bit ADHD these days, or oh, it's a trend, which is really unhelpful and really invalidating, especially if somebody's built the courage to tell their friend or their partner or their manager at work, look, I think this is happening for me. Um, what what I suggest people don't do is offer their opinion, but just say something like, "Oh, okay, tell me more about that," so that the person feels seen and understood, well, and listened to. Um, so that really, really irritates me when people say that. And the other one is, oh, but you don't look ADHD, because of course there is no look.
I
So I
was
don't
gonna
know what.
say,
It's so bizarre, but
yeah.
people say it a lot, and not to me, but um, many of my clients have had this same comment, and it's not very nice.
It's like I didn't know we were supposed to have a look. So maybe
Yes.
I'm missing out on something, but yeah,
Yeah,
that's interesting. That's actually the first time I've heard that. So that's
yeah.
curious.
Maybe
That's
it's
really curious.
more in the UK.
It could be. I don't know. I'm not sure. So, what's one thing you would do differently now that you understand your own brain better? Like after you've been doing this diagnosis, this journey for so long. So let's take Susie from like about 10, 15 years ago. Like if you could tell her something different, what would you say to her?
I would say be kind and be compassionate to yourself, because it doesn't help. It doesn't help anyone to say, that word should, I should be able to do this. They can do it. Comparing yourself, don't even bother, because that never ends well. And we're all on our own individual journeys. So comparing yourself to someone else is absolutely pointless, and it only brings heartbreak. So stop comparing. We're all on our journeys in exactly where we're supposed to be, and be kind and compassionate, and work out what your needs are and honor them. You need rest, like you said. The other day, you took that rest, and by the way, rest is needed for productivity. So our society tells us you must work hard and you know don't do anything else but work. But that's so untrue, because we need to rest, whether it's a mental rest, physical rest, 7 or 9 types of rest. We need to do it. So letting go of those expectations that are outdated and don't serve us, and be bold and brave enough to live your life on your terms, because we have a lot to offer once our environment's right, once we've got the self-compassion and the structures in place, we can fly. Not literally, but yeah. So kindness and compassion, that's my top tip.
Oh, awesome, awesome. And about the rest, it's very true, especially here in the States. We work all the time. And one of the things that shocked me when I first had friends in the UK, several years ago, they're like, "Oh, we're going on holiday for like almost 2, 3 weeks," and I'm like, how long? Like, we can't be
Yeah,
gone that long here. It's a few days at most here at one time. And so it's kind of frowned upon here in the States, to take extended vacations, which is ludicrous to me. It's absolutely ludicrous. But honestly, for my dog grooming people out there, what Susie was just saying is, don't compare yourself to the groomer down the road who does like 10 to 12 dogs a day. If you only do 4 or 5 dogs a day, that's perfect because that's what you do. That's your limit, and you do what you need to do with that. So I think a lot of times in this particular industry, they compare the number of clients and how fast they can get these dogs out the door, and as far as their value of things.
yeah,
Because, you might have a specialty, right? You're more artistic. You might have a specialty. You're not
mm,
just doing a bath and a quick broom to get them out the door. You might actually be doing something
yeah,
more creative. It takes a lot longer to do. So I say just find your area, find your niche, so to speak, and then stick with that, and you're going to be just
yeah.
fine.
And
So
the
yeah.
dogs will know if they're being rushed,
Mm-hmm.
won't they? So
Mm-hmm. They
think
will.
about, that lovely care and attention you can give to the dog as
Mm-hmm.
well as honouring your needs. I mean, that's a
Exactly.
win-win right there.
Yeah, yeah. Do you have by any chance like a favorite, just kind of go back to the comedian side because that always fascinates me. But do you have like a favorite thing that's happened during a show for you, like or during an audience, as far as when you were describing ADHD? Do you have any kind of stories about that?
So quite often, whether I'm doing a comedy show or a conference,
Hmm.
I do like a quiz. You might be neurodivergent if, and I
Okay.
say if you have a floordrobe. So do you know what a floordrobe is?
There's clothes on the floor, but they're not quite dirty, but yet you can still pick them up, but they're scattered on the floor. Yep.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So when I mention the word floordrobe, everyone goes, "Oh, yes." And then some people are
Mm-hmm.
like, "What's that?" So I explain. And then I
Mm-hmm.
say, and you might be neurodivergent if you think, "Oh, I'm going to fold them up." So you fold them up, put them on a pile on your bed, get distracted, go back downstairs, come to bedtime, too tired. You look at that pile and you put it back on the
On
floor.
the floor. Mm-hmm.
Yes. And then
Yes.
if the
Uh-huh.
whole audience, because my show that I do 3 times a year is called ADHD The Experience, is a mixture of motivational talks and comedy. So the audience are 99% autistic and ADHD, so they're all nodding along. And the other quiz question is, you might be neurodivergent if you you get so impatient with people that don't get to the point of the conversation, and they're all go yes, and then I say, and you're also one of those people that doesn't get to the point, and they're like, oh yes.
Tangents, go off on tangents. Or I have a tendency, and I have to really watch myself, and I apologize if I've done this to you, but sometimes you'll finish their sentence, you'll anticipate what they're trying to say, and in order to
Yeah.
kind of hurry, you'll finish their sentence. I have to really watch that. And it's
Mm,
not that I don't want to hear what the person has to say. It's just in my brain, it's just firing all the time. So
yeah.
yeah, so I completely get that. Well, I got 3 out of 3, so
Yeah.
that's for sure. Yep, absolutely. So awesome. And Susie, can on your website, and I apologize, I haven't had a chance to go there and fully look at the website. But is there any way we can download? Do you have anything for sale, or are you just strictly where you book in to go speak public, or do you have any like books or anything like that for sale?
Yeah, so I've got a book. It's not for sale yet because it's due
Okay.
out for release on the 21st of August this
Oh,
year.
okay. Awesome.
Yeah, and it is available for pre-order. So on, well, Amazon, I guess would be for you in the States, and it's called Lost and Now Found, a guidebook for late identified autistic adults for understanding and self-acceptance. So bear in mind that many people are ADHD and autistic, and quite often they don't even know that yet. So this book is for anyone that kind of identifies with what I've been saying today.
Awesome. Yeah, and we'll definitely, when that comes out, I'll definitely make sure to link that in the description on
Thank you.
YouTube. Yeah, for sure, because I think more people really need to know about this. And I think there's a lot of
Yeah,
people out there that are still clearly still undiagnosed. And I think it actually, because the sooner you can get diagnosed and then set a program in place with either a therapist or coach, you can actually start, I guess, kind of getting your life back in order, like start doing the things you want to do, things that inspire you. And instead of
yeah,
having to be put in this box that society has built for you, right?
yeah,
So,
yeah.
yeah, that's what we're trying to do and help out. So, Suzi, I want to thank you so much for coming on and being with us today and making the topic very real and human and fun. I appreciate the quiz. That definitely was interesting. So, if today's episode resonated with any of you, whether you've been diagnosed or just suspect that your brain might work a little differently, remember that you're not alone and you're not broken, okay? You're completely normal with this. So you don't need to be fixed, and you just need tools that help support and work with your brain and not against it. That's all it is. So you can find Suzi's coaching and speaking work at her website, and I will link that in the description box below. But Suzi, what is your website again?
It's www.suzipayton.com. And on that website, if you go to resources, I've got a whole page of free downloadable resources as well. I've got one
Nice.
on how to help with RSD, rejection sensitivity. I've got a guide sheet for managers. There's all sorts on there. So yeah, help yourself.
Nice. Thank you so much for that. And if you're wanting to keep the conversation going, you can check out the Pet Biz community on Facebook, where we talk about business and honestly go through anything that you might have. And we go through all these experiences with no shame and no expectations. So we might even have about 47 sticky notes that you might want to put down. So, or 12 notebooks. Exactly. All right. Well, thank you so much, Suzi. And we'll talk to you guys soon. And thank you for watching.
Thank you.